Hey everyone, just a new video in a new series for today. I've been tossing up doing another retro computer build. If you might have remember back a while ago, I was in the process of getting one ready and going to shoot a whole heap of videos, and I didn't end up shooting any videos, only one, and I didn't end up finishing the machine. That being said, it's not a bad thing. I still have, quite a few parts that I will eventually use. Retro computing is something I do a lot of, and I got a specialty motherboard for it. It was just a Pentium 3 based, but in the AT form factor, not in ATX, which is getting a little bit hard to get a hold of at the moment, well actually for quite a while. Basically Pentium 3s, so your slot 1s and your socket 370s, they were the last motherboards ever made in the AT form factor that you could actually get them in if you want to use an AT case. Now, I will be talking about AT case that I will be using, but not today. This will be in a separate video. So when I'm talking about AT form factor, I'm talking about this. This is a 386 motherboard. This is the one that I've actually got for my actual machine that I'm going to be building. It's going to be a 386. This board is a little bit special because it'll take a 386. So this is the socket for the 386. This socket here is dual mode. This will take a 387, so the Masco, which I will be doing, but this can also take a 486. So this board will run either a 386 or a 486. So that's pretty cool. These went around, well, there wasn't any around for a long time when I was building. When I built my 486, I went straight from a 386 to a 486, and it was a 486 only motherboard. So yeah, and that was a DX33, I believe, a 486 DX33, and then I went to a DX266, and then a DX4100 was where I think I left my 486 at, and then went to a Pentium socket 7, and then etc, etc, etc. The cool thing about the AT series is that even though so this is AT, so normally 99% of ATs, form factor, or baby AT, these are also called as well, you'll just have the keyboard connector. Sometimes you'll have space here for the PS2 mouse, and it may not be populated, but you can actually populate that, and then you can run a PS2 mouse, and then an AT keyboard. But what you can do, you can get one of these little guys. You can see there it's got, that's the AT keyboard in there, and that's the PS2 keyboard plug in there. So all you have to do is plug this guy in. So when it's in the case, etc., you plug that guy in there, and then you've got your PS2 keyboard there, and you don't have to buy an AT keyboard. So these little guys are really handy. I've bought, I don't know how many of these little guys I've actually bought. They're on eBay. They're only a few dollars. You can get them as a cable, as well as just the actual converter. I prefer the converter, but that's up to you guys, what you decide. But in my build that I'm going to be building with this 386, I obviously will be using one of these because I don't have an AT keyboard. Maybe later on down the track I might get one, like an original IBM one or something like that, for the keys, because the keys are all clicky and feel a lot different to a standard PS2. So that's that little guy there. Now, I wanted to show a couple of things while I'm talking about going back to a 386, which is what this board will be. This is the official manual, manual number 1. There's a couple of them for the Amstrad PC1512, which was the first computer I ever used. My dad bought it. It's an 8086, and yeah, great machine. So I bought this the other day. I was really happy to get it. A lot of fond memories going back and rereading it. It's a really cool manual to have, and for me it means a lot, especially since my dad passed away. Anything like this, Dad would be looking down, and I think he'd be pretty chuffed to see that I've actually got one. I'd love to own a machine, but the prices are just through the roof. Plus, the screen is CGA, and they're near impossible to get. Most of them have all been junked. And really, with this machine, it's got a little notch in the top of the base, so the actual screen sits into it. So it's actually made for this screen. Otherwise, it'd sit on top, and it would look a little bit dicky. But anyway, I just wanted to show this little manual. It's a cool piece of history and very very close to my heart. The other reason for choosing a 386 was my more mainstream PC. And what I mean like that is the machine that really sort of opened up. I mean, an 8086 was okay, and 286s were okay, but they were limited, and there wasn't as many games. People weren't writing as much for them. I feel that the 386 was really where PCs opened up. They became a little bit more cheaper, a little bit more mainstream, and people really started using them. So that's one of the reasons I want to do a 386 build. The first 386 I had was, I think, an SX. It's either a 12 or a 16. I can't remember exactly what it was. I definitely never had a mass coprocessor because you just couldn't afford them. So in this build I will be having one, which is really cool, so I'm happy about that, because I've always wanted to have a 386, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold, I think. I always wanted to have a 387 in the machine just to see how the maths helps. Now, one other big reason is this machine, normally when I build a retro machine, I build it for a reason, so that I can actually do something with it, or it can do something that, you know, that I need. Like, it can be functional again and be really, really cool to use. So what I want to do is I want to use it as a, primarily, obviously it'll be a DOS machine. I might put Windows 3.1.1 on it, I'm not sure yet. I'll use GeoWorks. GeoWorks is like a Windows alternative. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's really, really cool. If you jump on YouTube and type GeoWorks, it originally came out for DOS, but I think it originally was for the Apple, and I think it was for the Apple. Don't know if it was the Apple II or the Apple IIe. It was one of those that came out originally. And it needed basically no CPU power and basically no RAM, and it was a whole suite for doing, you know, like as if it had, like, you know, Word and Excel and Access and all that sort of thing. So it was the sort of the forerunner to Windows. I can't remember the crossover for when it came out, Windows came out. I have a funny feeling it came out just before Windows. And then Microsoft ended up killing it, but the reason they killed it was not because of Windows was so much better, because it wasn't. They made a deal that said that if you wanted to buy Microsoft DOS for a machine to sell as a retailer or a manufacturer, that you weren't allowed to use GeoWorks. You had to run DOS only, or DOS and Windows, and that was it. They weren't going to give DOS to anyone. They weren't going to license it or sell it to anyone who was going to run GeoWorks. So that basically killed GeoWorks. So that was a bit nasty, but back then in the computer industry, those sort of things happened. So yeah. Now, the other big reason for building this 386 is that I want a machine that I can run, obviously, the Settlers on, because it's, you know, my favorite game of all time. So this guy here. This is actually the DOS box version. You can always find the Amiga version, but the actual PC DOS version is very hard to find and is usually really, really expensive. So I've got one or two, and as you can see down the bottom there, in here you can see it's the PC version, and I'm not sure if this is gonna... come on. There we go. You can see there it says requires 386 or higher with 4 meg of RAM. Well, the RAM shouldn't be a problem. Hard drive won't be a problem. But I'll be running it on a 386. When the Settlers first came out, I didn't actually have... I didn't actually play it. I didn't know about it. It wasn't later till when I had 486, etc. that I actually played it. So I've actually never played it on a 386. So that will be an experience as well. I was also fiddling around the other day with a ISA sound card that had wavetable synthesis on board, which I'd been working on basically, and that was the first time I'd played the Settlers on a wavetable sound card, so that was really cool. The music kicked ass. I was really, yeah, it was completely different. It's weird going back to FM synthesis, which I already know, and we've all known that, we've all heard that for years and years and years and years and years. So it's a bit weird going back to it now and not actually having that, but unfortunately it's not something you can just add to a tablet PC or something like that. You have to do it, with an actual PC. So yeah, so this is the motherboard. A few things that I will be doing. Obviously I'll be covering more topics as we go along. This is the cache memory for the 386. Basically, why has that gone out of focus? Basically, the 386 has no level 1 cache. Only the Cyrix chips did, and I think AMD chips did as well. I'd have to check on that. But anyway, when this is run as a 386, this cache here of chips, they're all 256K each, 32K by 8, if anybody wants to get technical. These run as the level 1 cache, so these are really important. So what I did is, one thing I really want to do is go to town with this board. I want to sort of run it, maybe not as quick as humanly possible, but I definitely want to do a few things to it. So I bought a whole new more SRAM for it that's faster. That's, I think, 12 nanoseconds. And yes, I did actually say 12, which is just insanely quick. I think it equates to somewhere around 85 megahertz to 90 megahertz throughput, using 0 wait states. So that's pretty quick. I mean, it's going to be a lot quicker than what I need, but that's one of the things I want to try and do with this board, is because it's so important, because it gets used as the level 1 cache. I want to make it basically 0 wait state straight to the CPU, so it runs really quick. I want to try and run some really quick memory, do some probably a little bit of overclocking to the CPU, but that'll happen very much later, and then just a little bit of overclocking on the ISA bus as well. Hopefully I might be able to upgrade the BIOS. I found a couple. I found, I think, a 92, 93, and I think a 94 version of the BIOS for this machine, for this board. So that will be interesting. If you're ever doing any RAM upgrades, if you're ever doing any BIOS upgrades, make sure you always keep your original chips and just buy new chips and write onto them. Because otherwise you could get to a point where you're stuck and the machine's not going to boot without a functional BIOS chip. So that's a good rule, and I use that rule for everything, whether it's PGM, motherboards, whatever. Always write new chips, never write over the chips that you want to reprogram. Always buy new ones, or replacements. They don't have to be new. That's one of the cool things with most EEPROMs. Just gotta make sure that you get a little bit faster speed, because EEPROMs do slow down with age, which not a lot of people know, so there's a little tidbit for you. So you want to look for around 100 nanosecond is the EEPROMs that you want to try and get. For boards like these, you could probably get away with 120, maybe even 150, but I wouldn't go that far. I'd just do 100 and just be done with it. I have bought a few chips ready for it, but some are still in postage to get here. So yeah. Now another thing I want to do is obviously a full recap. Now you're probably looking at this board and you're going, "Oh Tim, I don't see any electrolytic caps on here to redo. So what are you going to do?" Well, this board's been made with probably one of the most evil devices that was ever built for electronics, and that's these dudes here. These are tantalum caps. They're not monolithics. They look more like monolithics, but they're not. They're actually tantalums, and there's an absolute shitload of them all over this board. Now, why are they evil? Okay. The biggest thing that's evil about them is when they die, when they basically come to the end of their usable life, when they're tired, when they're basically, don't want to work anymore, to put it bluntly, they short themselves out. Tantalums do that, and normally when they do that, because they're usually on a power bus or something power related, they can take out chips and other, you know, nasty stuff that you wouldn't want. I don't know which is worse, the tantalum caps, or the you know, your CMOS batteries that pass out everywhere. Probably the CMOS batteries are probably the worst. The rechargeable ones, the NiCads or the nickel metal hydrides, they're bad because they just eat the tracks away. At least these you can get to them usually. So yes, I was going to replace them with the Panasonic SVP series, which are a solid polymer cap hybrid. They're really expensive, but they're really, really good. The only problem is that they do come in through hole, but not many, and these are all through hole. So I think I'm just going to have to go for the electrolytics and just replace them with electrolytics. And then some of these caps over here will be for the V core of the 386. I'll probably put some extra caps around there, because I think that will help with doing a little bit of overclocking and stuff, and just making the board a bit more stable when I'm trying to run it with 0 weight states on it. So guys, that's basically it. I just wanted to do the first video. I'm going to do videos all the way along the way, so that people can see how I'm doing it. Plus, it may inspire people to do their own builds. And even though I'm using a 386 motherboard here, you could use a Pentium, a 486, Pentium 2, Pentium 3. I'd probably stop at Pentium 3 because Pentium 3 is the last boards you can get that have ISA slots. And if you're going to run DOS, I'm sorry, but you've got to have an ISA sound card, okay? That's just it. If you're going to do it, if you're going to try and run DOS without an ISA sound card, you're going to have problems. Okay, there are some cards, PCI cards, that will work, but if you really want a retro DOS machine, it's got to have at least one ISA slot. Most Pentium 2s and 3 boards have got 1 or 2. So that'll get you out of trouble. Some even have 3. I saw one ages ago that had 4, so it's generally not a problem. And then you'll have PCI as well, obviously. So yeah. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to do a quick video on the motherboard, and I'll be doing more. And I hope you enjoy, and I hope to make more that you guys will like and find interesting. And yeah, as I said, you know, if you want to make your own machine, or you have any questions or anything, hit me up on Discord. It's probably the best place. I do have a group just for retro computing in my Discord server, so you can jump in there and have a chat. Anyway, guys, catches.